Okay, good evening, everyone. I hope everybody can hear me, and I hope that you are all looking forward to what we have in store this evening. Tonight, we've got a special addition to our presentation, and in that we have a couple of representatives from Chapel Feedlot with us. Billy Hall and Tom Williams are on the phone, and so they're going to kind of discuss what has been going on in chapel with your steers for the next 30 minutes. And then after that, starting at our normal time at 7 o'clock Central Time, then Clint with Superior and Allied Genetics will take over and tell us a little bit about his topic this evening. So I do want to give a quick update on the ASA staff side tonight. If we have troubles, you can blame Chip and I. We are not the technologically savvy staff on board with SPC. Traditionally, Jackie runs most of the controls, and they had their third little girl this morning. So we're welcoming Dr. Jackie Atkins' daughter, Greta Clare, into the world. And so she is without us tonight and probably will be for the next few weeks. So with that, Chip, if you've got any notes, I'll let Chip add in, and then we'll turn it over to Tom and Billy.
Thank you, Emily. Again, to those of you listening, just to echo her sentiments, there's going to be a lot of good information this evening. We'll try to keep it moving pretty quick so we don't eat up too much time. So before I introduce Tom Williams, the man who is presently the caretaker for your steers, I want to give you a quick update on a couple items, and Tom will be welcome to fill in on these anywhere he wishes to. Two things that I'd like to highlight. One, because of the various movements in prices on feeder cattle at present and heavy cattle, certainly have been taking note. And Billy Hall, who's likely listening to us at present, also with the Chapel Group, Billy has been monitoring very closely when he feels like is the appropriate time to utilize some hedging opportunities to protect us financially on those calves and to protect your investment. And so I want you to know that there certainly are a few of you who are aware of those sort of tools. Talk more about those in a future call. But just so you know, if you're out there wondering if we thought about those things, absolutely. The Chapel crew's out in front of us, and they are watching closely, and they actually have a price point in mind that they will execute that if that price point hits. And so just so you know, that is out there. It's on front of mine. Also, secondly, a while back we were having conversations about the Grow Safe feed intake system there at Chapel. And again, because of some of the space, it was looking a little bit difficult to get those cattle into that Grow Safe system. The Chapel crew has really stepped up and somehow managed to squeeze a little space into their schedule and make room for a portion of the SPC steers into that system. Again, not everybody is going to be able to get a calf on there, but FYI, we got 40 steers into that system, and we couldn't be more grateful to Chapel, to Tom, and to everybody for being able to pull that off. To give you a sense of how those spaces were allocated, we needed to find a mechanism to sort out those 40 steers. And what we did for anyone who had multiple calves on the project, on the competition, for anybody with 2 calves or more, you got at least 1 head in. For those who had 3 calves on the study, you got 2 head into the Grow Safe system. So that's just a little bit of a heads up. In fact, actually, I maybe have misspoke. Actually, some of the folks with 2 calves probably got 2 calves in as well. So all the same, it got up to 40 head, and I just wanted to bring you up to speed on that. So that's enough listening to me ramble because it don't make all that much difference in this grand scheme of thing. The man who comes up next is much more relevant. Tom Williams has been more than gracious to host this project for us. Without Chapel Feed Yard in western Nebraska, this project would not happen. And so I'd say hello to Tom. Tom is going to give you a little bit of an update on what's going on. And so I'll just be quiet and let Tom kind of give you the lowdown on the situation out in Chapel, Nebraska.
One more quick thing. I'm sorry, Tom, before you go. If you have a question for Tom anytime throughout this, chat it on the right-hand side of the screen. If you talk, we can't hear you. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a chat box. put your question in there if you've got any questions for Tom, and I will relay that over. I apologize for interrupting, Tom. It's all you.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, guys. First, I guess we really appreciate all you young folks feeding here. We really think there's a lot of value in you learning what goes on the feedlot, and I will tell you that probably no one else besides Simmental that I know about is doing this. So your association is to be commended, and you all are to be commended because there's obviously risk in feeding your cattle. There's risk in all phases of the cattle industry, but we've been working with the Simmental Association, the Carcass Merit Project, for 10 years or more, and really appreciate the association and the things we're doing together, and creating a lot of good data, good relationships, and so I would just say thank you for considering us to do this project, to all of you. I know Billy and Trevor would echo that. So I don't think Trevor's on, but Trevor Toole and Billy Hall and my wife, my family, excuse me, and I are all partners in Chapel Feedlot, so we all have a vested interest in everything we do. Just a little introduction to we have always pursued retained ownership cattle. That's kind of our deal. Probably 90% of our cattle are retained ownership, or 80 or 90. We like working with ranchers. We like getting involved in their genetics. We end up getting involved ranch by ranch on an individual basis with mineral programs, vaccination programs, and I would say that probably 3/4 of our customers are repeat customers year in and year out, for some of them a very long time. And the things we do to help you improve your genetics with carcass data collection and just performance comparisons to other cattle, to know kind of where you stand in the industry, to look at individuals, to help evaluate your own programs, your sires, dams, etc. We like being on that side of the feeding equation. And so the feeding industry is consolidating. Lots of big feedlots are company-owned cattle, feedlot-owned cattle. We call it a commodity feedlot, and there's actually fewer and fewer of us smaller yards that would even want to do these kind of programs. But we relish it, and we really appreciate all of you coming here, and we hope we can do a good job for you. Just a little background, and then I think we'll open it for questions, because I've kind of been told there's probably quite a few, so I want to leave time for that. And if Billy, if you want to pipe in, just go ahead. But overall, we've had a decent feeding winter. Winter can be a little tough in our neck of the woods. Generally, we're a little higher elevation than some of you, except I know there's people west of us in Colorado especially. But we're kind of the high plains region that we typically don't get a lot of moisture, and that's been the case this year. There's been a lot of snow and a lot of cold north of us. We've had very little snow, and probably one of the most important things in winter feeding is pen conditions. We have not had much mud. We've been pretty dry all year, and after doing this for quite a little bit, I think pen conditions are probably one of the most important things as far as performance goes, and even carcass traits a little bit. So overall, it's been a pretty good winter. We've treated some of your calves. We've had a casualty. We've had a realizer. I need you all to know that can happen. There's risk in that. There's risk in markets. We can control market risk. We cannot control weather, obviously. And, with health issues, if we find issues when we work with with different ranches and producers. If we see some things in immune systems that could be improved, we try to address that and work with that part of it with the producer, as well as genetics and improvements. So we're all about data. We like science. As Chip told you, we have some of your cattle in the GrowSafe system. That's been up for a year. And I just think I'm kind of a data guy anyway. And I think it's really cool. I'm glad we were able to get some of your calves in there. It's honestly been a struggle to get cattle in there. It's only been there a year, and it hasn't hardly been empty for more than a few days. So we really like that system. I think it's really providing some good information. With that, unless you can think of something, Chip or Emily or Kathy, I think I'd open it for questions and let them have time to bring those forth.
Tom, I do have a question. One of the things is every industry and every portion of our beef industry has some of its own jargon. You used a terminology that they may not be familiar with. You realized a calf. What does that mean?
Okay, what we call them a realizer, and what it is, it's if we have a calf that just isn't performing, let's say he's had some health issues. Typically, the health issues are respiratory in cattle, but not always. There's other things. Lameness. We have a fair number of cattle that have a brisket disease problem, and that's a whole other subject that someday maybe we can talk about. But there's a lot of different reasons for health problems, but respiratory is number one, typically, in all feed yards in America. And if we have a calf that doesn't respond to treatment or whatever happens, and they're just not performing, then we actually sell them to right now a place in Texas, and you get about half of the value you would as a feeder calf, but you get something. And typically the calves we send as realizers are some sort of a chronic condition that will never perform and could possibly die. And so we try to realize the value they have. And that's why we call them a realizer.
Okay, Tom, I've got our first question for you. What difficulties have you encountered with your feed efficiency testing?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. What difficulties have you encountered with your feed efficiency testing?
Actually, very little. Probably the biggest difficulty is getting all the cattle in that we have demand to get in, to be honest. The hardware, the system works very well. We've only had a few days in the past year that something went wrong, and I can tell you GrowSafe is very good to work with, and they're very service-oriented. We had a problem, and they had a guy down here from Canada to fix it. I think we had one other problem we could fix ourselves just by phone calls. But it's very accurate. If you want to pull up GrowSafe, I think you can get some details on it, but I mean, it's like thousands of data points a second. It's pretty amazing, really. So really, it's not foolproof, but it's pretty good, pretty close.
Thank you, Tom. I just had a question texted to me from one of our younger members, just wanting some kind of basic information. Could you describe the basics of the diet that those calves are on at present, and roughly what you think those calves are consuming a day for these folks?
Sure. Across the board, since there's a lot of different calves involved, just using an average, typically when we get cattle on hot feed, they're going to eat something like 2.2 to 2.4% of their body weight on a dry basis. And so 1,000-pound critter, which is about where most of yours are right now on average, are going to eat like 22 pounds of dry matter, 20 to 22. Some will eat less, some will eat more, and that's one thing that GrowSafe has shown us, that there's, I think one thing I've learned that I didn't realize is there's a tremendous variation individual to individual. We've run a lot of cattle through there in the past year, and it's pretty amazing that some cattle won't eat much and yet convert well. Some eat a lot, don't convert very, very well, and and everywhere in between. But our rations run about 62 to 64% dry matter. So if they're eating 20 pounds of dry matter, that's like 32 pounds as fed. And we are pretty aggressive in our nutrition. We do have a consulting nutritionist, and he's good. I really like him. He's been with us a long time. And if any of you are into nutrition, we feed about, in our finish ration, it's about a 14.8 crude protein. It's about a 64 megacal and about 8% roughage, which is low. But we also, part of the reason we do that is we feed a product called Impact, which is a Purina patented product that regulates consumption, regulates intake through the day, and that lets us feed a little lower roughage level and a little hotter ration. So we're pretty aggressive in our ration. We're pretty aggressive in our implanting, and we try to get all the production in pounds out of the cattle we can, and still have good grade, since we sell on the grid and sell on carcass value.
Thank you, Tom. I've got two questions, and I'm just going to merge them both, since I think they're not necessarily related, but I think they're two that you can plug away at pretty quick. First part of the question is, will the steers be getting a mid-test weight, and if so, kind of roughly when will that be? And then the other is do you feel these calves are still on target for a tentative harvest date there, late spring, early summer? What's your thought process on that?
Excuse me. We have the cattle that went in GrowSafe. We have a mid-weight on them because we weigh them in. Basically how that works, we put them in the pens, and once we give them about a week, which we call pre-trial, because they have to adapt to eating out of those. There's 4 troughs for 40 head, so they have to learn to take turns at the bunk, basically, where they didn't have to before. So we give them a little time to adapt to that, and then we weigh them and put them on actual test, and then we weigh them off test. And it's about a 40-day trial. And so we have weights when the 40 head that went in there, just from like 10 days ago or something. We'll have weights when they come off. We have not done a mid-weight on the calves that did not go in the GrowSafe. But when we ultrasound them, which is a whole other subject, we do ultrasound, and we determine our marketing sorting from that. And we'll have a weight on them then, and probably we'll use that weight for a mid-weight, which will be actually about 2/3 of the weight of finish. And as far as marketing, I would say yes, May, June, pretty much. We'll sort through them, and they'll kind of span over 60 days. But I do want to add that walking through the calves, I commend you folks also for the quality. There's a lot of really nice calves in that group. So we do want to make them as big. We want to give basically what our scan does is we take them to optimum endpoint, which means weight, marbling, back fat, a combination of those traits, which is determined by when we ultrasound them. And so our goal is to make you the most money that your genetics will allow.
That's a pretty profound statement right there, isn't it? I mean, that's the job.
That's what we try to do, yes.
Yep. Oh, so one more question, and I think probably to keep you on time, we'll limit it to that unless another one pops up real fast. So after we're done with our visit with you, Tom, we'll go and listen to Clint Berry from Superior, who's going to talk about a myriad of things, but one of his highlights is going to be shipping slides and understanding a little bit of what that means when it comes to essentially getting cattle to you on a regular basis. I guess just curiosity from your perspective, because these kids are getting an opportunity that's a little bit unique for folks their age to learn on these topics. Do you feel in general that those folks who feed with you that first time or two, how much of a learning curve is this even for adults, whether it's regarding slides, grow safes, just basic rations? Give me a sense, give this group a sense of just the learning curve for a new feeder.
I think for most people, most ranches that we deal with that are new, that are doing it for the first time, feeding for the first time, the learning curve is huge, because most folks out there don't know that, and that's why I love this program, because these kids are going to have they're going to have more information when this is all done than most 60-year-olds, unless the 60-year-old's been feeding. So there's just the feedlot is a whole different situation. The marketing system from feeder to fat, everything that happens in between is just a whole lot different than raising that calf. So I don't know if I really answered your question, but the learning curve is huge. And I've been on both ends. I manage the ranch, and I've owned this feedlot, and there's just the cattle business. I think if more people knew it from birth to plate, we'd all be so much better off and so much more understand that. And that's why I really like this program for these guys.
Awesome. Well, and that's exactly what I was hoping you would hit at. So I do have one last question or set of questions that kind of all run together from one of our participants out on the East Coast. And so regarding both sorting and commingling of the grow safe calves, meaning when they're done in the grow safe, I assume they'll go back into that population of those calves they came out of, but I'll let you answer that, whether that's correct or not. But then also, when it comes to harvest dates, to maximize what you just mentioned a minute ago about making them the most money, how will you view sorting dates or different harvest dates relative to this group of calves?
That's a really good question, and I can tell you that a lot of packers wouldn't put up with me, but we have an agreement with Cargill over here at Fort Morgan, which is our closest packing house. It's 100 miles. And they like our cattle so well because we sort them and because we get such good top-end genetics. They love our cattle. And so over time, we have made a deal with them that we're going to give them about all our cattle. We're going to grid them, and we're going to sort them. And so what happens is, this is the reason we needed to take possession. So all of you folks' cattle have our brand on them. And so this enables me to go in and basically sort them in about 3 groups of 20 or 30 each group. And we send split loads on our trucks. So, you know, when we ultrasound them, that'll tell us how we're going to sell them and how many go on which sort. But typically there'll be 3 times. And so we couldn't expect Cargill to have 10 owners on 14 calves, for instance. So that's the main reason we need to take possession and put our brand on. So we will sell them as Chapel Feedlot, and we'll send 15 head or whatever the first cut is. And collectively, they will bring so much money. And then what we will do on the grid is we'll go through and we'll have data on each calf, and we'll split the value out so you are each paid exactly what you should get for the carcass merit of your calf. And so this enables us to do that. So that's how we do it. We have every week we have different owners with different head counts, and I can just tell you that Cargill, a lot of packing houses would not do that, but because of the quality we get and the way we sort, they allow us to do it.
Awesome. So I want to dovetail off of something Tom just mentioned, and it goes to a comment that was just sent to us. Yes, so you gathered that both the packing plant and Tom will go to some extra lengths to make sure that each of you continue to get all your individual data back in the way that's necessary, so that you can not only realize the amount of money that you need to get for your particular animal, but also so you can get that insight. But that also then points out something else that I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up, and of course Tom would never say that in this environment, nor would Billy or Trevor if he was on, or Sierra or whomever. But Chapel has taken on a pretty substantial burden just from a paperwork standpoint for this. You would be surprised. I wouldn't ask Tom to comment on this because he'd probably be too kind to say the truth. We probably asked him to do as much paperwork on this one pen as probably half the rest of the yard. So I just say thank you for that. And Tom, if you have any last thoughts, I'd say throw them at us. Otherwise, we'll move on and say thank you for all your comments this evening.
Good questions, and I probably don't have anything to add, but I guess 2 or 3 months will culminate this. You'll get a lot of data, and we'll go from there. So appreciate you guys, and thanks for having us on.
Thank you, Tom, so very much.
You bet.
And Billy, I know you're out there, and thank you to you as well, and Trevor, if you joined. So, folks, again, for some audio issues, I hope you can still hear us okay. Obviously, some of you can because you're listening. Just real quick, I want to introduce our next speaker so we can get right into it. Mr. Clint Berry. Clint's pedigree is an interesting study in determination and hard work and positioning yourself well to have an impact in an industry you have passion about. So I encourage you, if you ever get the chance to pick Clint's mind close and personal, or through this platform later, I encourage you to do that, about how he's been able to situate himself in his current role with Superior Livestock Auctions and along with Allied Genetic Resources. Clint gets around to see, frankly, more feeder calves than I can begin to wrap my brain around, and moves more than most of the rest of us will do in our entire lives in a pretty short window of time. Clint's based out of southern Missouri, and yes, I did say Missouri, but that's just the hillbilly lexicon that Missourians use for that home state. So anyway, Clint, I'm going to turn it over to you. I hope you've got the screen. Clint Berry is going to talk to us. Pay close attention. If you have questions, again, continue to share those with us.
Thanks, Kip. I appreciate that very much. I'm proud to be here tonight and get a chance to visit it with y'all a little bit. As Chip mentioned, my primary role is I'm a representative for Superior Livestock Market, and what I do is I work with a customer base spread across the country. My wife and I, if you're watching online, let's see if I can make my screen advance here. My wife and I and our family, we run a commercial cow-calf operation in southern Missouri, as well as marketing feeder cattle. I work with Allied Genetic Resources as well as a component in what I do on a nationwide basis, and I'm here for feeder cattle marketing through bull customers of the Allied Genetic team that are spread across the country. The little screen in front of you there will kind of show some locations where several of the seed stock breeders are located at. In addition to the Allied team, I've got a set of reps that work with me that are spread across the country at Superior. I've got 2 in Montana, 1 in North Dakota, 1 in Iowa, and 1 in Georgia. And I'm currently interviewing a new rep to add on in Nebraska, trying to blanket the country to where we've got enough local representation that we can service our customers at ease, as well as having a national presence, so that we can concentrate on the big picture as well. The rep team and I specialize in marketing high-quality, known genetic cattle. The hardest thing for us to sell is a commodity-based average calf. The majority of our customers, and When I say majority, I'm going to say 90%, 85% of the feeder cattle we handle are going to be from some top-end genetics. They're going to be typically multi-year operations that have been using AI. They're going to be buying bulls from very reputable seed stock sources, and we use those genetics to help price differentiate those cattle in the market. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into it. The beautiful part of my job is I get around all parts of the country. I believe last year I personally delivered cattle out of 13 states, and as a rep team, I think we're shipping out of 18 as we currently sit. And I get a chance to see a large portion of the country, get a chance to visit with cattlemen from all over the U.S. On a daily basis. Matter of fact, I just got back from Kentucky right before we sit down to have this discussion, and shipping cattle today. But we move cattle, like I said, from multiple states and multiple areas, everything from single head loads to as many as 10 or 12 on a day on a given time frame. We work hand in hand with our buyers. They're an integral part of our relationships. I probably spend as much time building relationships with our buyer base as I do actually working with our sellers. Even though our sellers are the ones that actually hire us to market the cattle, our goal is to build long-term repeat buyers for our customers' calves so that the market ups and downs, we've got a customer base that knows our cattle, trusts our cattle, and knows that they'll work for them past the end point when the cattle leave the farm or ranch. We talk a little bit about price differentiation. That was a term I used just a second ago. And we start talking about why cattle bring different amounts and why some cattle are worth others, and a lot of that has to do with genetics. The slide that's on the screen right now is data that was compiled by Kansas State and Merck Animal Health for us last year, analyzing a little over 500,000 head of calves that sold in our summer month auction period. You'll notice right off the bat the first kind of cornerstone of all value-added programs of all cattle operations, when we start talking about capturing value beyond the ranch, all starts with health. And that's a combination of nutrition, allowing the animals to have the right kind of supplementation, the right kind of trace mineral programs to allow the vaccines and the genetics to express themselves for the lifelong efficiency of those cattle. On Superior Livestock last year, you'll notice a couple of points I've got up there. We've got a VAC 34 or 34 plus. The plus in those terminologies is one additional shot of pastorilla. But just so you understand, a VAC 34 calf is a calf that has had a round of vaccines while it's on its mother. Well, a lot of people will call that branding time, but it's when it's a small calf on side. Whether they brand or not isn't important, but it's a calf that's probably getting his first round of vaccinations while on his mother at 200 to 300 pounds. And then at least 2 to 4 weeks prior to taking delivery, or when we actually ship the cattle, load them on the truck, and they transfer ownership from the farm and ranch onto the buyer, they'll get another round of shots, including modified live virals, prior to leaving the ranch, 2 to 4 weeks prior to. And what that does is that sets those cattle up to where we're starting to build a higher level of immunization. And once they get to our buyer, those cattle then will receive their booster shots. It's a time frame there that allows that calf to be the most highly vaccinated balling or non-wean calf that we can offer. Those cattle brought $2.60 over what we would consider to be our low wean cattle, which was we call them a VAC 24. Don't worry about the terminology as much, but that's a calf, like I said earlier in the VAC 34 criteria, that's had shots on its mother when it was a small baby, 200 to 300 pounds and nothing else. At Superior, we'll market above 1 million head of cattle. We're the nation's largest livestock marketer. We sell more cattle than any other entity in the business. And we do not sell non-vaccinated cattle, per se. And what I mean by that is the statistical data is less than 1% of our cattle haven't had a round of vaccine of some sort, some kind of recorded vaccination program. But these cattle are going to bring over that one shot as a small calf on its mother. These cattle are going to bring over $2.50 a hundredweight more. So if we're talking about a 6-weight calf, we're talking about delivering somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 to $18 per head over that calf with just a shot on its mother. And then you move into the VAC 45 protocol, and this is kind of our gold standard. And you'll see a considerable jump here. Most of that is because when we talk about VAC 45, the 45 represents 45 days or more weaned. So this calf has had everything that the VAC 34 has, including the second round of modified live vaccines, blackleg and pastorilla, as well as being weaned for 45 days. This is the gold standard, and these VAC protocols are what most of the state extensions that have feeder calf programs will follow. We started these VAC protocols over 20 years ago. This is our 30th year selling cattle with Superior. This is our 30-year anniversary. And so these cattle have become the gold standard in the industry as the definitions of herd health programs. Then we move into the source and age verification. We saw a little over a $2 premium last year on that. Those cattle, that's the kind of the starting point for a lot of the other added value programs. And what that does is it individually identifies those cattle to a source of origin, to the ranch of origin. Then you move into the superior progressive genetics, and that's the part where we were talking about having some cattle of known backgrounds, where we know where they've been sourcing their bulls from, or we know which bulls they've been AIing to. Those programs were showing over $1 a hundredweight premium. So all of these numbers I'm throwing at you are per hundredweight. So on a 5-weight calf, that's an additional $6 a head. And then the source and age premium would be over $2 a head, and the VAC 45 would be almost $9 a head. And you start adding those up as you move through this program, and you can see how these cattle can bring quite a bit different than others that do not qualify for these value-added programs. And when we're talking about that, if you ever get a chance to turn on and watch the video, you can watch it online at superiorlivestock.com, or if you get Dish Network, you can watch every other Thursday. We have an auction. You can watch our sales on the Dish Network channel 232. That's rural TV. But when we're talking about these value-added programs, you'll notice on this screenshot here, there's several logos laid out across the bottom of this. And this is one of my actual customers from Ranburne, Alabama, that market cattle with us. They're an allied customer. They buy bulls from Gibbs Farms, and they AI to select sires. And you can see the genetic source codes that are on the screen there as well. In addition to this, these cattle are a VAC 45. You can see that gold shield there. That means, so as we talked before, they've had 2 rounds of modified live, 2 rounds of blackleg, and a pastorilla, and been weaned a minimum 45 days. On top of that, they're NHTC qualified and certified Natural Plus. The NHTC stands for non-hormone treated cattle. So that means cattle that are export eligible by a third party to be able to be exported into the European Union. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. But that gives you an idea. Those cattle have the ability, if the buyer chooses, to be eligible for export to a whole nother nation. In addition, a lot of customers will buy NHTC cattle, and they themselves at the feed yard will implant the cattle because they're getting the good from that technology versus the rancher capturing it prior to sale. You'll also notice a couple of emblems on there. That blue triangle that says Superior Right Slide. We'll talk about slides in a little bit, but that represents how these cattle are going to be sold and slid if they don't quite match up with the pound total that we're offering on the sale, and a weight stop, which means anything beyond the 25, it's a 25-pound weight stop. Anything beyond that, the buyer doesn't have to pay for those additional pounds at weigh-up time. So in this particular lot, like 4347A, we're offering a load, 64 weaned steer calves weighing 760 pounds. And then you'll slip down there and you'll see like a delivery date in June of last year. That gives a buyer an idea of when the cattle are going to be delivered, what they're going to weigh. If you click on you can't do it on this slide, but if you click on the lot numbers, it'll pull up specific contract details in our cattle, all the way down to what exact vaccinations you gave and when you gave them, to the type of mineral that you may be feeding. To a lot of our cattle from our rep team are going to have average EPDs profiled on there to where you can understand the type of genetics that are backing these cattle up as well. Superior markets cattle throughout the U.S. in 6 regions, spread across the country. So, you know, if you're watching along here, you can kind of see what region you happen to be in. Just for a little discussion, I've just picked out some cattle that sold in Region 3 in our most recent sale. And you can see these are cattle that the weight range is on the left-hand side of the screen, the price range is on the right, and you can start to see some big differences in the price of cattle. For instance, if you look at those 600-pound steers, you can see a $16 difference, $15.50 difference between cattle that sold on the same day weighing the same amount. And the reason that those cattle do those kind of things are because of those value-added programs that offer a buyer a chance to own a calf that has less risk or more potential income for him as he remarkets or harvests that calf. Much like what y'all's program is about and teaching you the differences of cattle in the feed yard. You move into those 6.5 and 675-pound cattle and look at the price difference that we saw on that sale on them. $25 a hundredweight. I mean, that's a huge difference. You know, you're talking some serious money when you get to dealing with that. That's $150 a head on a 6-weight calf. And that's the kind of price differentiation that we see in the marketplace when we market cattle out of known genetics with added value programs and through an outlet that can price differentiate on the price of feeder cattle. Some of the things that a lot of people ask about and don't get caught up in the data on this. One of the points that I want to drive home to you is when we're talking about these value-added programs, the market is a living, breathing thing. So what is going on in the market today may be very, very similar to what goes on in 3 months, and it may be totally opposite of what goes on. There's supply and demand factors that are constantly happening, whether that's export money or program eligibility or animal health outbreaks or supply and demand from a simple low volume to high volume or the price of beef in the retail case. There's all kinds of factors that play into this. Here's just one of them. You look at the difference in implanting over the last 20 years of data that we had there. You know, when we started out in 95, over 65% of all the cattle were getting implants. And now you look at 20 years later in 2015, and nearly over 70% of the cattle were not implanted. And what that's changed as we've moved along, on this slide you can kind of see how the value of those implants affected. So in 1 year, say, take a look at 1995, a non-implanted calf was actually a discount in the marketplace. But you turn around and you look at 2007 or 8, and you're seeing a premium on the other side of it. And what that is an indicator of is the supply and demand factors that's happening. What we found at Superior is we've had over the course of the last few years, we've had so many cattle that are not implanted that some of that data or some of that value has been washed on those calves. And one of the conversations we're having with our customer base this year is not every customer is going to decide their own management scheme, whether they want to be natural or not natural, or they want to implant or they don't want to implant. But one of the things the data is telling us is that our customers need to be looking at the technology of implants because we're not seeing a price differentiation in the marketplace for cattle that have only had one implant prior to selling. One of the other big factors that we have that affects the way cattle are marketed and the value that cattle can deliver, and this is kind of what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight, is the slide options. And at Superior, we offer a customer, a seller, to choose 3 different kind of slides. We have kind of a conventional slide and I've got an example of how that works. I'll walk through it just a little bit. Then we've got 2 newer slides. The right slide was released 2 years ago, and the 2-way slide was released last year. And the major differences is the conventional slide works off a selected amount. In this case, in the slide, it's 20 cents. The customer chooses 20 cents. So if the cattle weigh over the projected weight, for every pound that they're over, we're going to multiply that by the 20 cents, and we're going to get that price and deduct it from the hundredweight price and pay the customer. And I'll show you an example of that in a little bit. And what that does is that helps protect the buyer when he buys a set of cattle through our system that he may buy a month to 3 months, maybe even 4 months prior to delivery. It protects him that the cattle that he bought is what's going to be delivered to him at a relative price that he paid for them. The right slide works on a different philosophy where it's a set amount adjusted for cost of gain, and I'll show you a quick example of it as we move on. The 2-way slide is our greatest flexibility from a seller standpoint because it allows the cattle to move up or down 25 pounds, and the slide will operate if the cattle come in light they'll pay a little more for the lighter calves. They'll increase the price per pound. If the cattle come in heavy, they'll decrease the price per pound. But both ways, the seller can make a little more, and he's got a little more flexibility. However, it does lock them in to protect the buyer with a 25-pound weight stop. So if they fall beyond the 25-pound measure, the buyer is still protected. So just a few slide recommendations that we're currently working on in this marketplace. I don't want to bore you with details, but that's kind of what we operate off of on the conventional slide, what we recommend to our customers selling different weights of feeder cattle versus the kind of slides that they're going to see in a competitive market. Let's take just a quick look, just so you can kind of see how the slides work. In this example, we sold a load of steers at 600 pounds at $1.40, and we're going to offer them with a 12-cent slide with a 2% shrink on the truck. Now that sounds pretty mathematical and a lot going on there, but just concentrate on the fact that we sold a 600-pound steer for $1.40. And we've told the buyer that if we come in heavy, we're going to slide the cattle 12, and we're going to give him a 2% shrink on the truck. We'll talk a little bit about shrink as we work through this. So on the day we actually go out and deliver the cattle, we sort them up, and I load the truck, and our cattle are actually coming heavy. They come in weighing 624 pounds instead of 600. So our cattle are 24 pounds heavy on the average right now. That's the gross. Now here's where the 2% comes in. I hope some of you have heard about shrink on cattle, and what shrink is loss in weight due to water evaporation in the muscle tissue, as well as feces and urine being deposited out of the calf, and just overall stress of the calf. At Superior, we try to offer a contract that's fair and equitable on both sides. Many of you may not know this, but it's not uncommon for cattle to shrink 6 to 10%. Some can do more, some can do less. Different types of cattle are going to do different. The way you handle cattle is going to be different, whether or not they're weaned or balling, and what weight they come in, it can be different. But it's not uncommon for a buyer, like the set of calves I shipped today weighed 450 pounds, and they're going to drive 700 miles today. Those cattle are going to probably shrink 8 to 10% by the time they get off the truck, and they're weaned calves. So that buyer, he may have bought a 6-weight, but if they shrink 10%, then he's actually going to be delivered a 540-pound calf when it actually walks off the truck. So you can kind of understand when we talk about shrink, that's a major difference in what we're offering. So this load of calves come in and grossed 624 on the average, but we offered the 2% shrink, which drops our weight down. So we're going to give the buyer, in essence, 12 pounds for free. In essence, he's going to pay on 612. That's 624 times the 0.98. So that's what we're going to pay on, which is 612. So there's your shrink that comes in. So now we're 12 pounds over what we originally said we were going to sell. So you multiply the 12 pounds times the 12 cents, and that's $1.44. We sold the cattle for 140 a hundredweight, or you can call it $1.40. But we're going to subtract 144 from that 140 pounds. That's going to reduce our price to 138.56. Now, it sounds like, as a seller, you've just taken less money for your calf. Here's the important part that I want to drive home when we talk about slides. This is what I want you to walk away from, to understand that these slides are a protection for the buyer. But any time that our sellers get into a slide, they're actually going to dollar up and make more money on a per head basis, but yet it helps keep the buyer from his break-evens being totally disrupted at delivery time because of forces that were beyond our control, Mother Nature, timing, things like that the cattle just weighed more than what we anticipated. So just so you understand, so we're multiplying our gross pounds times the new price of $1.38, and that's going to give us a grand total of what is owed by the buyer of $67,785.77. Now, if we had hit, and remember what I said, that sounds like the buyer is taking a discounted price on a per head basis, and he is taking a discounted price. We have reduced the price, but because we're paying on more pounds, he's actually going to make more money on a per head basis. And that's the only part that I really want you to take home about these slides. The mathematics can be worked out on a case-by-case basis, But when a seller gets into a slide and your cattle come in a little heavier, you're still going to make more money per head than what you would have. See, in the original contract, that last line shows if we had hit right on money and the calves had weighed exactly 600, we would have paid you a grand total of $67,200. So you actually made over almost $600 difference on that load of cattle because they weighed 12 pounds extra. As I mentioned, the right slide, which was the other slide that we had, that's annually adjusted, and it's based on the cost of gain. Our current standard amount is 70 cents for both calves and feeders. So in this case, just to make it simple, you saw all the mathematics on the conventional slide. On this slide, if that calf weighed 12 pounds more, we would simply multiply the 12 pounds times the 70 cents, which would give us a total of $8.40, and we would simply pay you the price that we agreed to pay you plus $8.40 additional on the.
Clint, are you still with us? Hang with us a second, folks. FYI, while Clint is obviously getting his audio back, we have a handful of really good questions. We'll kind of save those here towards the end. But again, a number of good questions have already came in. So as you...
Chip, I'm sorry, I'm back.
Okay, good. Very good. I'll let you take over the screen.
Okay, I apologize.
No problem at all.
I lost audio there. So anyway, that gives you an idea of the difference in the right slide as we were talking. And the two-way, as I mentioned before, allows, it works the same as the conventional slide, but it gives a seller the opportunity to sell those cattle up or down 25 pounds, high or low. So this is a nice slide for a guy that's maybe selling calves right off the cow and doesn't have as much control as somebody that's weaning their calves, or somebody that's got new genetics within their herd. Maybe they've bought some cows and calved them out and never weaned these calves off, or they're drastically changing something in their program and they're not sure exactly how that's going to play out. And it protects the buyer because it's got a mandatory weight stop of 25 pounds. So he knows that if he buys a 6-weight, the most amount of money he would be responsible for would be 625 pounds on that animal, not more if the calf happened to come in that high. So if we look at them two slides, I'm just going to run through this really quick. Remember, originally that was the price you were going to pay for a calf if we hit right on the money. And if we were overweight on 70 cents on the same amount of pounds, let me just run through this real quick just for the sake of time. You can see at a total truck payment, I mean, we're talking a difference of only $60 between the two slides. So it's really up to the seller what they're comfortable with. And that's the other part of the slides I want to drive home. Our system is set up to where it's fair and equitable whichever direction you go for both buyer and seller. There's not a drastic difference between the two. It's just up to the customer what they're most comfortable with. So just a few keys as we go through this. These are the take-home points that I'd like for you to keep and understand. The weighing conditions are a vital point in marketing. If you really want to perform the best when you market your cattle, you've got to provide an avenue that builds confidence from the buyer to buy your product, especially if he doesn't know anything about it or ever purchased your cattle before. And what we're after is a way to promote aggressive bidding. We want competition in the marketplace, and that's why how you sell the cattle, whether that's the percentage of shrink that you're willing to give the buyer or the way you're going to slide the cattle, is vitally important just like the vaccination programs and just like the genetics you're using. It's a combination of all of the above to present it in a package that the buyer's happy with. If I cook you a hamburger and lay it in the floor and ask you to eat the hamburger, it's not nearly as appealing as if I put it on a clean plate and hand it to you, but it's the same hamburger. So presentation a lot of times really makes a difference in how the prices that are received at market. In this business we're in, volume is the king. Make no mistake about it. But uniformity really delivers results when we're marketing cattle. Every day that goes by, through technologies that we have and the ability to identify cattle, every day that goes by, cattle are getting differentiated in price due to what's underneath the hides, stuff that you can't see visually. And I think over the course of the next few decades, as most of you become adults and leaders in this industry, you're going to see a drastic difference in the value of cattle based on what is truly under their hide genetically, nutritionally, and vaccination-wise. And then the point that I drive home to my guys is use what works. Sometimes we try to outsmart ourselves, but use these proven value-added programs. We've got data for 30 years showing that these kind of steps that you take year in, year out in a high market or a low market will add value to cattle. At Superior, this is just a little plug, but at Superior, the thing that, if you talk to people and you mentioned that, that a Superior livestock rep was talking to you, the seller is in complete control of the cattle when he sells them. He tells his story is what we call it, but he's going to lay out how, when, where, and when delivery is on those cattle, and then we're going to put them on the nation's largest market and allow a buyer to offer him up a price, and if they agree to a contract, he's in complete control from start to end. We're talking about, at Superior, all of our cattle are forward contracted. So most of the time, just a good for instance, the cattle are sold in the summer and delivered in the fall, or they're sold in the spring and delivered in the summer, or vice versa. So we talk about forward contracting as a way of risk management a little bit, or trying to take advantage of supply and demand factors that typically in the summertime, when we're selling cattle that are going to be actually delivered and put on the truck in the fall, the days that we go and we may sell those cattle in June, July, August, maybe September, we may ship them in October, November, December. There's most years when I'm shipping cattle in October and November, the price for the cattle that we earned at market in the summer is actually higher than the current prices if they were just loading them on the truck and taking them to the local livestock markets. And most of that is due to seasonal differences and supply and demand. The fact that during the summertime, we're one of the few sources with cattle that they can forward contract and start to fill their pens in a feed yard and know what they've got in those cattle, and they start to mitigate some of their risk from a buyer standpoint. But it also allows those cattle to or those customers to take advantage of the fact that in the fall there's such a big run of supply on cattle that they can't, that it just presses down price as the laws of supply and demand operate. That's not 100% true, but if you look at the data, 17 out of 20 years or so, that's been pretty straightforward. We are bonded, meaning that when you sell with us at Superior and agree upon a price range, agree upon a contract with our buyers, you are protected, and so long as you deliver the cattle according to contract, you will get paid 100% in full. It's not just a handshake deal, but it does protect our sellers, especially in the last few years when we saw such incredible market volatility. It was not uncommon in the fall of 2015 for me to be shipping cattle in December that we sold in August that may have maybe $30 difference per hundredweight in price, and my sellers were protected there. They didn't have to worry about whether or not the buyer paid his bills. We're bonded to make sure the seller gets paid. We are the nation's largest marketer, and we have the largest buyer base. Over 8,500 registered buyers are on our annual or our bi-monthly markets, and those proven value-added programs really separate the difference between common cattle or commodity-based cattle and cattle of quality genetics. So deliver your cattle with value to your customers, with service after the sale, offering the right kind of options is the key to differentiating your cattle in the marketplace. We like to use Superior. Part of that is building your brand from our customer loyalty standpoint by working with market professionals that understand how the market works. We like to say at Superior, we're marketing your year-long efforts, but we're also working to market efforts for the years to come. So we may be selling your parents' or your grandparents' cattle today, but part of what we're building is the ability for you to take advantage of their brand as we move down the road and you take over at the family farm or ranch or start your own. But it's a great way to it's not just about this year, it's about all the years to come. And who you partner with is a reflection of your brand. I will give you just a little tidbit of advice, whether
I think we know what's happening here, so we'll give Clint just a second to get his audio back. While we do that, again, we're doing well on time. I think we're doing well to keep you all from getting to that 8 o'clock hour, whatever straight up is in your particular time zone. But again, 3 questions at present that are sitting waiting for Mr. Berry when he gets back with us. And so if you have another one, now's the time to get that question sent in here pretty directly. So. For any of you who've ever taken bids at a bull sale, you know we get to all experience these things from time to time. I think Clint's back with us.
Yeah, Chip, I'm sorry, I'm having phone issues.
No, you're fine.
But
you're fine. We did just part of it.
Okay. Well, like I say, I apologize. The message I want to take home is care enough about your product that you want your buyer to be successful. And that's what differentiates those cattle. Remember in the examples I was showing you of $20 and $25 per hundredweight difference in the value of cattle that sold on our sale just last week? That comes from being able to offer a product that has value to your customer. Do we have any questions?
I've got some sitting here that people have gotten to me. So first question, on occasion we hear the term basis relative to these kind of conversations. What's that mean?
Well, it can kind of depend on what aspect you're talking about, but a basis is kind of like the difference between the cash and the futures. And Chip, you're really getting into an area of expertise that's beyond my experience level. Those kind of conversations are usually dealt with a broker or somebody that can hedge cattle and help you understand the difference between some of that. So, I mean, I'm going to, the difference is a basis is really about cash and forward contract differences. But that's another line of risk management where you hear people talk about buying puts and calls and hedging cattle, and that's best talked about with a broker or a professional of that sort.
Well, no, and I appreciate you saying that, because I think what you just heard Clint say is, yes, he could spend some time talking about this, and he's probably more versed than most of us common mortals, but everybody's got to know their lane a little bit, and part of this to give yourself the best opportunity for success is to have a variety of professionals that you can leverage. And so
that's correct.
Just wanted to throw that out there. So I think an obvious question for you, Clint, is, and this is one that has been sent to me, is that customer who's had a traditional relationship with their local sale barn, and let's face it, many of them are very successful and very tickled with that relationship. However, if someone feels like they're maybe considering investigating this kind of option, what do you find to be the steepest learning curve? Maybe going back to similar to the question with Tom earlier, what's the biggest thing for them to get over? What's the biggest hurdle to accept if they're going to go down the route of something like Superior?
Sure. And let me start off by saying I work hand in hand with a lot of livestock markets and have had a lot of success working with them. And a lot of my customers market cattle both with me and local livestock markets. And the policies or the strategies of marketing that I was talking about tonight, you can leverage those kind of strategies through just about any market out there. So this isn't just about video marketing. It's about marketing cattle and marketing your product overall. Our format excels at that. Some livestock markets I've worked with do an excellent job. Some livestock markets I've been around do a very poor job. So that's going to be a learning curve for you as a seller that's going to have to take advantage and know where the strengths and weaknesses are in the market that you're in. But the biggest learning curve when people come to the video, once they wrap their mind around the fact that we're going to sell a truckload lot of cattle about every 45 seconds all day long, the sheer volume and number of cattle that we handle, the biggest learning curve is going to be how to project what those cattle are going to weigh on a forward basis. Because we may be selling these cattle in July and shipping them in October. And so we're asking you in July to tell us what those calves are going to weigh in October. And that comes from needing to have some records and knowing what your cattle have been doing, and then understanding what weather conditions may be looking like, even though none of us can control Mother Nature, but what your genetic components are as well. What kind of feed, what your feeding strategy is as well. Are they taking grass cattle, or are they getting a TMR ration and planning on gaining 3 pounds a day? I mean, it can be a drastic difference. And the way that we leverage that risk with new customers, we utilize any kind of data they've got in the past. A lot of times we may utilize that two-way slide here recently. That's been a very nice cushion for a new customer to know that he's got some flexibility up and down. But we also narrow that gap. We may not sell cattle 3 and 4 months out. We may only sell cattle a month or 2 months out to help narrow that gap down a little bit to where they can feel a little more confident in selling cattle and actually delivering a contract or delivering the cattle to match the contract.
Perfect. Thank you very much for kind of walking us through some of those initial thought processes and how you kind of work through some of that. So along this lines, given conversations you and I have had in the last week, you are going to appreciate the insight of some young people from Kansas. Have a young person who's obviously kept up on some of the inner workings of ASA as recent, and ask the following question. Where do you think the potential of IGS's new feeder profit calculator fits in to the picture that you've just painted for us?
Well, and that's a timely question. I really appreciate that, because I spent some time with Chip and the crew from ASA to better understand the calculator and what benefits it could provide our bull customers, because it's a tool that we will plan on using as a marketing team for our customers that can qualify for it, which is going to be basically probably 99% of all of our customer base. The potential it's got is to have a differentiation tool with technology that can easily and quickly put an economic value on a set of cattle. And what it's really doing is putting an economic value on a set of cattle sired by a bull battery mixed with health and management techniques that have economic relevance, much like what my data shows in the market. So it's got great opportunity, especially once it gets up and running, and perhaps we can get some pull through from some buyers, as it grows a little bit, to help those guys understand that the bigger side of it that I see in the short run is that it's a great way to initiate a conversation with bull buyers. As a bull seller, it's going to be a great way to initiate a conversation with bull buyers as to how they can improve the marketability of their cattle in conjunction with all the other traits they need to select. Because we never want to be single trait selectors, but we need to improve the end product after it leaves our customer's ranch or farm just as much as we need to improve the direct product.
Clint, thank you. Not to make this a feeder profit calculator commercial, But just if there are 1 or 2 or 10 of you who are curious about that, again, the last week at NCBA convention, there was a lot of discussion of various industry leaders along the lines of Clint and many other folks whose names carry a lot of weight in this industry about how to make this better and how to continue to evolve this tool so that when it comes out live here in the very near future, that it's as good as it can be coming out of the gate. And to that, I say thank you to Superior, because they've actually offered some of their own economic insights and some of their own understanding of the population of feeder cattle to help us kind of augment some of what that profit calculator can do. So again, don't really need to make it a commercial for this environment, but I just wanted to recognize Superior for their generosity on that. So it looks to me at present that you've seemed to address the bulk of the questions that were presented to us in one way or the other, and nobody seemed to have addressed that differently. So Clint, I'm going to say thank you. We have one other quick housekeeping thing, and Emily chime in if we need to, but I do know that I am supposed to remind you that your write-ups regarding this session are due by Valentine's Day. So hopefully some of you, or at least your parents, will have better things to do on Valentine's Day than ensure that you get your write-up done. So I don't know, hypothetically, you might want to do that in the next day or two while it's fresh on your mind. Again, as always, in the near future, this particular webinar will be put up online for you to go back and review. I would suspect that there are a lot of things, both from Tom and from Clint, that you're going to want to listen to again and view again. So I would encourage you to do that, and I'd also encourage you to have folks watch over your shoulder, let mom or dad or brother or sister or friend who has an interest in the beef industry watch over your shoulder. So Emily, if you have any last-minute things, chime in.
Can you hear me a little bit better? I know a couple of you mentioned that my audio was rough. Chip, is this better?
It's slightly better, yes.
Okay. The only thing that I've got to mention is our next webinar is Tuesday, March 7th. So, of course, the first Tuesday of the month, March 7th, make sure you get this one on your calendar. We'll hope to have Tom and Billy back from the chapel yard to kind of give us an update. Of course, you should have received your mid-January and hopefully soon your early February bill. So make sure that you are paying your feed bills, guys. I'm going to come hunt you down if you're not. Other than that, that's all I've got. Like Chip mentioned, be sure to get your write-ups into me by Valentine's Day. And we will talk to you all very soon on March 7th.
Thank you all.
Have a great night, everyone.